Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review the sixth episode of What If. What if Killmonger had rescued Tony Stark within the Tony Stark Iron Man film before Tony Stark had went off to go to that cave to speak to Jensen and all of a sudden learn a thing or two about what he should do, which is to become Iron Man. We instead have a Iron Man that is to still just be like, hey man, I'm still going to be building weapons. I'm still going to be building a miniature variation of Jericho, which is, yeah. So going into this episode, we have mostly this kind of giving us both the Iron Man kind of first movie and also giving us just really Black Panther, kind of like a mixture between these both movies, and then like a little snippet of Age of Ultron in between there with the exclusion of Ultron, and really just like we have just still like Claw, who is to eventually have to answer for his crimes, let's just say. Going into this episode, I thought it was fun. But you could really just tell that Killmonger was to be swapped out with certain kind of people, and it seems that Killmonger was to be Tony Stark's new favorite. So all of a sudden, like he just becomes like, hey, he's basically just becoming like who, like certain other people were in Iron Man's life. Like all of a sudden becoming his new roadie, and all of a sudden just becoming his new Pepper, let's just say, and so on and so forth. But the interesting thing about this episode is the real, true, legitimate chess moves of seemingly like Killmonger just be like, heck yeah, like I guess they're not even realizing what the heck I'm doing. And then all of a sudden there's to be a person here and there that's like, you know what, like you're not as smart as you think you are because I had this plan, and so on and so forth. So, kind of an interesting episode, and it's kind of interesting to see how all of this eventually all played out to eventually have Killmonger to work back to his way, to kind of attempting to do the exact same thing that he ended up attempting within the Black Panther film. So yeah, like so in a very roundabout way, we kind of get into the Black Panther of things. So with that said, let's go out of our way to say that it is just. I think I've kind of said everything already about this episode. I don't think there's anything that I could have not said. Whatever. Anyways, biding time. So anything, yeah, that I could have probably said cryptically, I'll go into spoilers and just whatever. Anyways. Let's go to that double five time territory because it's that customary time yet again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time we spoil this episode. So good episode, if I haven't said that already. Actually, just a great episode just because I just thought it was fun. I thought it was fun. I thought for the most part it felt original, even though we kind of go through the same beats of parts of movies and whatever. It kind of feels familiar, but familiar but not familiar is really what we could say. So let's go out of our way to say it's that customary time yet again. Let's go into it. So, very beginning of the episode, of course, we just have Tony Stark, who is to be in the Humvee, and instead the Humvee. So he's talking to his military people, and of course we get like the scene that happens after like Tony is talking about the girl's cheekbones and whatever, and talking about the girls in the calendar and whatever. Like we really just have them focus mainly on the one soldier wanting to get a photo with Tony Stark, and he's like, "Hey, no gang signs." So like, "Hey, throw it up." Oh, hey, peace. Yeah, I'd be out of a job with peace. So all of a sudden, this Humvee starts taking heavy fire, and so of course we eventually get it where like Tony is asking for a gun in here, which he didn't ask for that in the original Iron Man. He just scrambles out of there. Or we just have one guy who is to try and to stay in the vehicle to have supposedly protected Tony, uh, but the guy doesn't stay there for very long. So Tony scrambles out and tries to get his phone out to make a phone call. All of a sudden, to see the Stark Industries missile coming down at him, and now we have the what if moment, where all of a sudden Killmonger just bizarrely arrives out of nowhere, takes this rocket, chucks it in the air before it explodes, and Tony Stark is like, "Wow, like thank God that you were here, like Mister Killmonger or whatever," because they bizarrely had the word Killmonger like bizarrely put upon this guy's chest for whatever reason. Like, I guess to just be like, well, he has to have a name somewhere upon his chest. We can't just have Killmonger mention that his name is Killmonger. Uh, Plus, it's also kind of funny that in the very first Iron Man film, uh, Jeff Bridges' villain's name is Ironmonger, and so we have Killmonger and Ironmonger in the same film or in the same episode. It's hilarious. So technically, Killmonger is technically Iron Man's villain in this episode, but Tony never actually becomes Iron Man in this what if. Like, he dies too quickly. Uh, so what ends up happening is that uh, Tony ends up doing a press conference after this whole thing is over, and is to mention that uh, instead of having to stop everything that he's doing to kind of check where all of his equipment is going on to be and whatever, instead Tony's like, no, we really have to go after these guys and find everybody who's going after our stuff. So like we got to really like give these people the best weapons, because that's all one track mind that Tony is to have. So all of a sudden we also have Killmonger, who is to be addressed as Tony's new, like, basically roadie, in all honesty. And so Killmonger is to basically have us be aware that he had tracked everything down to eventually find that Obadiah Stane was the cause of Tony's almost uh, uh, kidnapping, let's just say. And so Obadiah Stane gets arrested, and so now there's a position into having Obadiah Stane or his job. And so instead of Pepper eventually going and getting uh, really just Obadiah Stane's job, we have Killmonger who ends up getting Obadiah Stane's job anyways. And then we just have this spot where we just see Pepper, who's just like, well, like, I guess I'll just be off then, and I'll just consistently just still be Tony Stark's assistant, I guess. Like, you just see her kind of just, like, saddeningly, like, walking away, like, that should have been me, So, we have Killmonger talking to Tony, and so it seems that Killmonger had took it upon himself to have designed this drone, which he ended up calling the Liberator. And so it seems that they, in a roundabout way, go and do the whole, like, the arc reactor kind of thing to eventually kind of power the suit. So eventually that just kind of happens, but instead of it actually being like an Iron Man suit, we just have all these kind of droids. So this is kind of like Iron Man 2 in a way, where, like, in a roundabout way, we still have an Iron Man technically out there, but it's really just to be these droids, kind of like how Mickey Rourke did in Iron Man 2, where it's like And then he's like, I will make salute. You make suit? Like, what? So we all of a sudden have Tony, who is now perfectly designing all of these Stark Industry droids instead of eventually what has become like Iron Legion or anything cool like that. No, he just makes these goofy looking droids that look ugly as F. It's, I guess, just the real rough job of having just this droid that just does not look that good. So so now we just have Killmonger with these Liberator droids, and Killmonger is to also tell Tony about vibranium, how they need to get as much vibranium as humanly possible to be able to give these droids all vibranium. And Tony is like, well, I thought that was a rare element that not anyone had. Well, coincidentally, we had Killmonger who had his father's ring that had vibranium in it. And I guess Tony could figure out the elements of figuring out vibranium, but still, like, they needed more vibranium. And so Robert Downey Jr., because I guess he has some dealings with the black market, was to have able to easily figured out that Ulysses Claw was to be able to have seemingly a ton of vibranium on the black market. And so now, like, Tony Stark is like, well, hey, I'll send Rhodey over there, and Rhodey will get all the vibranium for us. It'll be like an actual, like, military thing that we're doing to kind of just resolve all this and get the vibranium and have there to be a real legitimate thing. And this is not like some kind of weird back alley deal or something like that. So Rhodey is to go off to get this vibranium, and so he's having to deal with Claw. And all of a sudden, T'Challa is to appear and to start like taking down just pretty much everybody because he doesn't want anybody to have this vibranium because all the vibranium should be left for Wakanda. So while that's going on, while T'Challa is to appear, all of a sudden we have uh, Killmonger that is to have the device in his ears, like Obadiah Stane has in Iron Man 1, where he is to have this device that kind of creates paralysis to where no one could really move. And so that evidently drops both Black Panther and both Rhodey. And so Killmonger ends up stealing like the glove from Black Panther and like scratches through this thing. Is like, yeah, like now I have Black Panther tech. Like, hey, this is great. But it doesn't really seem like he takes all of T'Challa's gear and runs off with it. No, like eventually he is to just like, well, I'm gonna win over the Wakandans. It's gonna happen, and then eventually they're gonna forcibly make me Black Panther instead of having to steal this gear. There's some master plan going on there. So Killmonger is to kill both T'Challa and Rhodey, but make it look like they both like killed themselves in action. And so then so eventually all of this is just to lead to just like taking of vibranium. So eventually we have like the funerals and everything be done of both Rhodey and both T'Challa. And so the next thing is for Killmonger to come back to Tony to eventually have Tony just be like, hey, like, good job that you've been doing lately. Like, you've really just been, really been doing really well. But here's also the thing, like, I just don't quite trust you. So all of a sudden, Tony is to have this camera footage that was done in Claw's place, seeing that Killmonger had killed both Rhodey and T'Challa. And so now Tony sicks one of these droids on Killmonger, and so Killmonger is having to fight this vibranium droid, and he ends up just easily taking it down because he ends up just like ripping off the head, and there we go. Like, so Killmonger had figured out the weakness of this droid because technically he had the blueprints and has built the thing, so easily being able to take this down. And so he ends up taking a spear to Tony and killing him off. And so the very next day, like, we have like General Ross, and we have like Happy, and we have Pepper, who are all there. And so we end up having that Pepper is to mention, like, wow, what a weird coincidence that we had like the footage of whatever was to happen in Tony's place, like bizarrely all erased for what really happened, how Tony died and whatever. So evidently Ross decides that he's going to seize all of Stark's tech, and like, I'm like, why couldn't they have done that before? Like, they tried to and failed, but why is it that they can do that now that they couldn't have done that in any of the other Iron Man movies? Because Tony didn't have like a next of kin kind of thing to give that up to? Because I guess maybe in this scenario he didn't leave anybody anything? I don't know. Maybe he left it all to Killmonger, and Killmonger was like, hey man, like, Ross, you take it. So what eventually happens is Killmonger is to go and kill off Claw again. And so Killmonger is to make his way into Wakanda, and so he ends up dropping crosses like, hey, let's haggle, because I got a body here that you guys want. So Killmonger is to talk to, of course, King T'Chaka, who is alive because T'Challa is dead. And so Killmonger is to convince this guy, like, hey, it seems that eventually these vibranium soldiers are coming for you, and I want to help you out. And if I via help you, that means you'll eventually just be like, yeah, let's make him Black Panther because we trust him. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because it's bound to happen, right? Because he's the only person that has the ability of being an heir to the throne, let's just say. And so it seems that Killmonger is to eventually just kind of work his magic to kind of mention about like certain stories to win over to Chaka and all kinds of stuff. So eventually what ends up happening is that Killmonger is also working General Ross to force these soldiers to make their way to Wakanda. Just be like, hey man, like, it seems like there's something that you don't know about Wakanda. Maybe you should go and check that place out. So all of a sudden, General Ross is kind of heading his way into Wakanda to eventually find out that, yeah, these people have much more high tech than they were to have ever told us. So eventually we're going to have to send everybody and our brother over there to now just try and figure out why they lied to us for so long. Why did they shield this information from us if they have such high tech gear and they have vibranium up to the yin yang? Like, why have they lied to us for so long? But we have Killmonger, who had control over these droids, and so he turned them off coincidentally at the perfect time for General Ross to not really see something or see much of Wakanda, but just enough to just be like, hey, there's some high-tech stuff going on here. And then so all of a sudden Killmonger turns the droids back on so that way it forces the droids to take down Wakanda, and Killmonger is the savior of all these people. And they'll, of course, reward him afterwards by just saying, like, hey, you're going to be working with us for however long because you're going to be the Black Panther. Because Killmonger with the Koye and any number of people just decimate and take down and kill like every bit and piece of all these robots. And so we have, of course, Killmonger, who ends up becoming the Black Panther. But then at the very end of this episode, we all of a sudden just have Shuri, who ends up coming to Pepper Potts and is like, hey, like, I have some information that no one else has about this whole situation. And so now, like, we need to put our heads together because we're, like, really intelligent women and to now kind of counteract what had gone on with this whole Killmonger thing. To where it's just like, okay, so I guess like evil or good is going to eventually prevail out of all this, but uh like we didn't actually see what that was. Like, is there going to be a what if story that continues this story somewhere, or it's just like, what if Pepper Potts became Iron Man, or like what if Happy Hogan became Iron Man, or like, is there going to be a continue of this story, or is it just going to be that that just dies right there, that somebody's going to figure out how to beat Killmonger? But I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, I just enjoyed this episode. It was fun. There's something fun about it. Eventually, Tony is to die again in a what if episode. So I guess that's funny. Uh, Obadiah Stane was to easily not have encaved, let's just say, and have a box of scraps and all that stuff, all that dialogue. All that dialogue is to be gone now because of this episode, and so on and so forth. So yeah, fun. I had a lot of fun with this episode. It was fun. So I'm going to get out of here. One thing that I have to say, just in case, because maybe I messed something up, and that's bound to happen. If I mess something up, I apologize. But otherwise, I had fun with this one. If there was something that I skipped around about or didn't get correct, okay. Anyways, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.